Lazarus, Revolution Unleashed, Decoding Sovereignty, Law, and Power Structures, aka Giving It to the Man. Sean Stone and Brandon Williams, guests today on Lazarus Symposium's signature segment, which is going to run for about an hour and a quarter. It may well go over that. Brief background. You all know and love Sean Stone, but Brandon Joe Williams is a highly regarded author, theorist, and advocate for personal sovereignty, renowned for his acclaimed books, Don't Be a Slave and Love is a Battery. He is the mastermind behind the groundbreaking state-national theory, offering invaluable resources to those pursuing individual freedom. And it would appear that those are going to be amounting to millions of souls in the very near future, because this, friends, is, in a sense, the pivotal, the game changer when people get to grips with this subject matter. Through Brandon's podcast and the influential Free Contract Killer course that he puts out, he further enlightens on the subject of personal liberty. And as a co-founder of the Nation of the Amnesty Coalition and Williams Law Group, continuously champions personal sovereignty whilst fostering a close-knit community. I have to invite you to check out his website with the name onestupidfuck.com. I'll leave the spelling to you folks. Sean Stone, of course, has made a very significant impact over many years as an author, television host, and staunch advocate for sovereignty and the truth movement. His book, New World Order, A Strategy of Imperialism, offers an in-depth analysis of global affairs and imperialism, making him a respected voice in the movement, in truth disclosure, and also, it has to be said, in interring the historical narrative and recontextualizing it. As a truth seeker, he challenges societal norms and encourages critical thinking about the reality we live in, highlighting the importance of spirituality and understanding our world and the matrix. More information on Sean's critical work can be found on seanstone.info. He is, of course, my biggest fan. Sean, it's great to receive you again.
I am. I defend you from a lot of people, I guess.
There we go. Brandon, very happy to you and Sean know each other.
Yes.
We're kind of triangulated, but very, very happy to receive you today, brother.
Thank you very much. I'm a pleasure to be here. Big time.
Excellent. The introduction here, the notes I've got, and I'll refer to them and try to sound as though I'm ad-libbing. In the present socio-political climate, a profound understanding of personal sovereignty is not just beneficial, but essential. And as we delve deep into this incredible subject, we'll unravel the complex tapestry of corporate law and explore the profound implications of individuals being classified as property. And we'll decode the nuanced distinctions between sovereign citizens and state nationals, which actually Brandon refers to just as nationals, and how these classifications shape our conceptualization of sovereignty. So the journey takes us through the labyrinth of elite power structures, challenging conventional wisdom and debunking common misconceptions about the legal system. So we're required to dissect the intricate world of sovereignty law and shining a light on the legal loopholes that often go unnoticed. Furthermore, we're going to discuss strategies for everyday citizens to regain their sovereignty, equipping you with the knowledge to navigate the convoluted corridors of power. It's about time we rise above the status quo. I think everyone looking in on this show is going to be entirely sympathetic with that viewpoint. And we need to challenge the normative constraints and understand what it truly means to be sovereign. Question to you, Brandon, to kick us off. What is a sovereign? What does it mean to be sovereign?
It means not contracting yourself as something incapable, or not contracting yourself as something that needs to go underneath something else due to some sort of idea of a lack of self-esteem, a lack of self-trust, or some sort of shame or guilt associated with feeling that you need to set up some sort of a contract where someone else has some sort of superiority over you, or controls your life, or needs to make decisions on your behalf.
Great. Sean, jurisdiction, standing under something else. What's your take on the quintessence of sovereignty?
Yeah, I mean, I won't go into jurisdiction. That's more of a legal concept. To me, sovereignty is it's a regaining our mind, our body, our spirit, right? So the movement towards sovereignty is it's a full body spiritual experience, and I think this is what a lot of people don't get when they look at some of these things and they try to brand it and like, oh, I heard these sovereign citizens got arrested or whatever. These guys are they're getting in trouble, and it's like, well, to each their own. Everyone's journey is unique to that individual. There are people that walk righteously and honor and they go through life and they do well and they basically are untouched. And then there are those who mess around, who try things that that are it may be dishonorable, illegal, whatever. There are consequences. It is a challenge, obviously, to walk in sovereignty, to actually establish and affirm your sovereignty. It takes courage. You got to be a lion in that regard, right? And then sometimes there are those that overstep and perhaps abuse that power, right, that they think that they have or they're claiming. So I look at sovereignty as very much it's this relationship to our soul, that we're affirming our own boundaries, our own kingdom, right, as sovereign king and queen, right, over our life. So the sovereignty thing is like, it's really, there's legal aspects, but most importantly, it's psycho-spiritual aspects of how we contract, how we choose. Wait a minute, how am I contracting into this? Who is and working with trusts, right? Trust is always, there's three parties always. There's the grantor, there's the trustee, there's beneficiary. Where do I stand? And ultimately, I believe that we are both trustee and beneficiary granted by God, right, to be here, right? So it's like when we connect that relationship with ourselves, and this is really the essence of sovereignty, so that you recognize that like you're the beneficiary of this experience, but you also have beneficiaries. So you're not just doing it for the ego, you're basically the trustee of this reality and of your experience, and also you're benefiting from it, but you're also here to benefit others with your journey. It's not just about you.
Beautiful. And, I love the fact, Sean, that you always hack into something from the consciousness and spirituality dimension, which is essential in my view. And of course, not lost on Brandon, who's a very monkish kind of guy. I mean, when I first met him, he turned up on a sort of 30,000 cc speed bike. He crossed the whole of Los Angeles in about 43 minutes to meet with a bunch of fringe Illuminati with me in Malibu. So thank you for that. Of course, you don't give a fuck about breaking law. We know that, Brandon. And I said to him, how can you drive at that speed on that thing, cross Los Angeles and not get, arrested 15 times? So you do have a certain quality about you, Brandon, which is kind of, I think, I wouldn't say spiritualized, but alchemized, because you've got a tremendous kind of brevity and confidence in the way you deliver what you deliver. There's no part of your delivery that is kind of sheepish. And I love that. And I think that it's very contagious. And I think that that's actually the key piece. How much of what Sean says from the consciousness and spirituality element do you regard as essential to the onset of this journey of learning about sovereignty?
Yeah, I mean, totally, 1,000%. I mean, it's a situation where, life is essentially on the spiritual. I mean, I can go off on spiritual for more hours than I can go off on legal. I just don't all the time, because it doesn't always connect with everybody depending on the audience. But obviously, I think your audience will. Life is a combination of two things. You have abundance and you have scarcity, right? Now too much abundance, you're going to get very, very bored. Your ultra rich sons and daughters at 15 driving $400,000 sports cars after smoking a crack pipe into a wall and then laughing about it. And then, on the lower end, you have your scarcity, right? And then, so it's sort of like an abundant scarcity. And then you also have like another dichotomy is like drive versus appreciation or gratitude, right? So like I'm in a lot of like, I've had a lot of business coaching and I've had a lot of business things and business this and business that and groups and like hardcore go drive. And what happens is those groups tend to fall away from the gratitude and the appreciation. And then you have the ultra spiritual side, which tends to negate the drive aspect and focus more on gratitude and appreciation. But I think there's actually a balance, and that balance moves throughout your life. I go through probably, I think everyone's different. There's not a right or wrong on this. So I'll just explain my own experience. I go through like 2 month or 3 month on, and then maybe 1 month off cycles. So I do like, and this is just natural. This is not based off of a book or off of a mentor or anything like that. Just what feels right to me. I go hard, 2-3 months. And then I'm like, ooh, I need a little something. And then I step back. But taking a break in my world is practicing a lot of appreciation and gratitude for what I have, and giving myself an abundance based off of what I have or what I currently possess, and enjoying. Even looking at, let's say, I was looking at a concrete wall yesterday in an Uber next to the freeway. And I was thinking in my head, what if I wrote a story as to how that concrete wall perceives life? And it was like describing cars, and like describing cars in a way where it's like, imagine explaining like a 2022 BMW M5 to an alien. And you have like this it's like this metal side, and it has these little flares that the air goes down, and you have these colors and these badges, and there's a sound that it makes. It sounds like some sort of like a machine. It sounds kind of scary, but there's something very alluring about it. It's almost like an erotic. You can almost make like an erotic fiction out of this like story about how this concrete wall perceives these cars, right? And it's to me, I feel like that's ultimate power, because the thing is that you walk the earth as someone who disconnects himself from all sources of which other people use scarcity to control you. So for me, I feel like the spiritual end of things, although there's a million other things we could talk about. We could talk about perception. We could talk about the creation of a future through, the painting of the future in your mind and all these different things. But even the painting of a future that you want to have in your mind, and then finishing the painting, and then having gratitude and appreciation for that of which you've created, you've essentially just given yourself that of which you want. So there's a certain, and again, a lot of this comes from law, because in law, all it is just the manufacturing of an illusion. So what you're doing is in order to regain control over your sovereignty and your law, you have to regain control over your ability to produce and appreciate illusions. That's how I feel about it.
Very good.
Yeah.
Good. Well, thank you for infusing erotica into, the idea of BMWs. That's a stretch, but I'm going to go with it. I'm going to ask Sean to kind of drill in with some questions, because his tend to be marginally more insightful than mine. But just to contextualize the conversation, can you just elaborate on the concept, Brandon, of being classified as property under corporate law, human beings and all that is being classified as property or chattel under corporate law, and its implications on personal sovereignty?
Yeah, when you're born, you have a birth certificate, which everyone's aware of, right? And there's a section of the birth certificate that says a date received by local health officer, or date of registration. There'll be some sort of other date there that you'll see a different name for depending on the state. That was the day that the Department of Health and Human Services opened up what's called a public corporation, which is actually a definition that comes from Black's Law. If you look under corporation, there's a section that says public corporation. And it says public corporation is opened by the state for political purposes and is used as an agency in the administration of civil government. It's just like right there. There's no conspiracy associated with it. Nothing to really debate or talk about. It's very clear what it is. That date on your birth certificate is the date that the public corporation was opened. And because the word person in law encompasses trusts, corporations, associations, and all legal fictions, that public corporation, which was opened probably about 14, 15, 18 days after you were born, is considered an entire person in law. And the thing is that you can actually do all sorts of things. I'm going through a name change process right now. I have a court date for October 13th. You can go through, you can trademark your name in all capital letters, and you're actually going to use that the same way you would use any corporation So no one would be able to put your corporate name on any documentation associated with anything having to do with performance or finances without your written approval. That's really powerful. Obviously, you wouldn't be able to get tickets after that point. You wouldn't be able to do a lot of things after that point. Really get in much trouble about anything. So realizing that you are essentially a business owner, and you're a business owner of a public corporation, and then retaking control over that public corporation and using that public corporation to your advantage, which I know is very strange in this whole arena of sovereignty and nationality. They say run away from it, get rid of it, destroy it, kill it, burn it. I'm probably one of the few people saying, take it, put it in a nursery and put a blanket over it and dress it up and feed it and give it milk, because it's actually extremely useful. It allows you to operate both in the system and out of the system at the same time while having full commercial limited liability. So that is my take on that whole situation. And you're just a business owner. It's no different than people don't freak out when you say like, oh, I have a business and I run the business and it's a corporation, right, and I have a bank account through the corporation and I have this and I have that. It's like, oh, that's just like normal. It's the same thing with your name. It's really not, to me, it's just kind of like every day. It's like eating lunch or going to dinner. It's just an everyday activity. It's nothing, there's nothing emotional about the situation. They gave you a business. You can use it or you can not use it, or you can get rid of it, or you can be ignorant of it.
Very good. Thank you. Sean, how's your business going?
Well, yeah, I've even filed doing business as my all caps name, filed it, with the Secretary of State and all that, right, in my state, because you want to do business as your all caps name. You can't avoid it. As Brandon was saying, I think there has been some elements within, that believe, as he's saying, like you have to kill the straw man or something. And there are the extremists like cut off, basically denounce the social security number and try to totally go private. The trouble is whenever you're in commerce, right, that straw man that's your piece. Basically, your name is your straw man, right? So whenever you're in commerce, that gives you that protection that if you could be the beneficiary of the name, right, so that you say, I'm benefiting from this, but I am not the name, separating yourself from that name. I think that is the key to everything that we're doing here, because we are operating in commerce until the system changes. But right now, the system as it now stands is one where the government does have the obligation to settle public debt, and everything that we're creating is public debt. Every security that we're creating based on our use of credit cards or promissory notes, right? All these things, they're all securities. It's all public, and that's where people think, oh, it's private. It's like, no, that's the thing. You're operating publicly in commerce. Right. The only private commerce would be using like gold or something, right? Because any dollar is still public. What does that dollar say on it? Federal Reserve note. It doesn't belong to you. And that's where people got to get their head around that notion that like everything we're talking in commerce is all public. And then there's, the private side, which is the spiritual side, right? But pretty much everything you're going to do in terms of business, in terms of driving around, doing anything, there's a commercial side to the interaction, right? Even if you say, well, I'm traveling on this road, okay, but still, it's still, how do you say, it's created by the government. It's still there on public lands, all this stuff. So you're still operating with commerce. You have to recognize that it's like you said, it's about how you become the beneficiary of that straw man and understand how to utilize that commercial element and not kind of try to conflict with it, because that's where I think you get into headbutting the government and headbutting these things and basically getting yourself into trouble, right, vis-a-vis the government, not seeing it as an enemy. You're not an enemy of it. You're non-combatant, non-belligerent, right? You're here to operate commerce as the I am that's using your name.
Very good. Beautifully stated. And that's curious, because that's two of the things that Brandon impressed upon me a couple of weeks back in Malibu was one, the idea about securities altogether. And Brandon's take, which I'll ask him to extrapolate on in a moment, is that every time the fiction comes against you, every time the government comes against you, or the IRS or any public institution in that sense comes against you, seeking to penalize you or incarcerate you or worse, lethally inject you, essentially the critical element from Brandon's perspective is to move back on the front foot in respect of the securities frauds that are being perpetrated against you in the first place by the fiction. Brandon, can you just extrapolate a little bit on that?
Yeah. So if you look at your credit card bills and everything, they have the public corporation name on it, right? So, and then you start looking up a lot of the different definitions and stuff, and you have the definition of the word bank, and it means basically any person who involves himself in the business of banking. And then every time you use your credit card, you're promising to pay whatever transaction that you have, and you're signing it either digitally or manually, depending on if you're going to a restaurant or whatnot. So every time you use your credit card, you're actually producing securities. You're producing promises to pay. Yeah. And those promises to pay, because the all caps name, the public corporation is manufacturing these securities, by definition, as per the definitions from even the Bill of Exchange Act or wherever you're going to find it, the public corporation, when it's creating securities, is acting as a bank. So that would make you a banker. So you are the one who signs. You're the agent on behalf of the principal. You sign on behalf of the public corporation to manufacture that currency, right? So you're a banker and you have a bank, okay? And your bank is part of the Federal Reserve System. And that's basically how it works. That's what ties you into the system, right? And you can basically, if you look at the Federal Reserve Act, Section 16, called Note Issues, Part 2, they say right in there that basically if I sign a promise to pay, and I have it right here, let's say I swiped a credit card and I promised to pay for a steak dinner, I can take this security that I just produced and I can write up an exchange order or exchange request, but it's pretty much an order because it says in Section 2 that they'll always approve it. There is no disapproval process. You can actually send in your manufactured securities in order to exchange them for Federal Reserve notes. And what's happening is that every month when you get your statement at the end of the month, you call it a bill. But if you look at the Bill of Exchange Act from 1882, it says very clearly bill means bill of exchange. So you've never once in your entire life received a bill. Your entire life you received bills of exchange, which is an entirely different term. If you look at the definitions of the various words, you'll realize that the basic, most ground floor definition of the word check means order. Now, that order normally has, and I have some checks here, that order normally has various things on it. It normally has a date on the upper right, who it's going to or coming from is on the upper left, and then pay to the order of, which is actually a legal term. That's why the checks say that. By the way, there's all sorts of tricks you can do with checks. Like, for example, pay to the order of, you can write the word bearer in there, and now anyone can cash the check. I mean, I don't know why you want to do that, but it's just it actually becomes cash at that point. You can actually change a check into cash by writing the word bearer under pay to the order of. So you basically just transformed the check into a promissory note, and legally that promissory note has the exact same value in law as any Federal Reserve note, because you wrote the word bearer on it. So that makes it what's called negotiable, which means easy to exchange. Non-negotiable is when you write in someone's actual name in the pay to the order of box, right? But basically, a check is just an order, and then it's signed or released. When you sign or release it, it's called an endorsement. An endorsement is the way that you release a security or an instrument. So when you learn all this and you look at the Bill of Exchange Act, you realize that you can actually take those bills of exchange that you're getting in the mail every month with all your securities on it, and you can write orders on the face of the Bill of Exchange, and you can mail it back, and it's actually legally a check. And you're saying take the positive value, which, by the way, all your bills of exchange are always in a positive value, no different than your bank account. Probably never noticed that. It's not negative. You can actually take the positive value of all those securities, and you can actually have them all exchanged for Federal Reserve notes and then applied to the account. Now, you got to keep in mind, in order for there to be a contract, there has to be equal consideration, right? But there's another part of it that's very fascinating, which I'm learning about more now because I'm about ready to sue American Express for a lot of money. There's interest on the account, and people always think that you're paying the interest at the banks. That's not the truth. The truth is that these securities that you're producing throughout the month, when you deposit them into your deposit account, which is your credit card statement, your credit card account, they're producing interest. So what I'm going to be doing in my lawsuit is I'm going to say, I'm going to give you guys, American Express, limited liability to actually endorse these bills of exchange on my behalf. And in exchange, I'm going to give you all the interest on the account. Now, so now we have a legal contract where we have equal consideration. And also what that does is it legally justifies me forcing them to remove all credit limits from the account.
Very good.
Because there'd be no point to have a credit limit because I as a beneficiary, like Sean was saying, there's no reason to cap me. And then on their end, I've offered them equal consideration for a sliding scale all the way up to infinite numbers, that the more I spend, the more I'm willing to pay them because the interest will accrue more on the securities that are produced.
Very good. What's your bet at the outcome?
Oh, 1,000%. I don't even think it's going to go to trial. I think they're going to settle it before trial.
Okay. It'd be very, very problematic for them to take it to trial.
Oh yeah. They don't, I mean, it's, I know this thing front and back. I've sent them many, many, many communications. I've sent them legal forms, requests, claims. The California Attorney General witnessed a few of the documents. The United States Attorney General witnessed a few of the documents. I got evidence out the wazoo. This has been going down for years. This is like a 2-year. This is probably like 2 years in the making, a year and a half.
Sean, what do you reckon? Amex with no credit limit.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's black card, right? I mean, but the interesting question is how much credit can they extend themselves, right? Because they have to get it from the Federal Reserve, essentially. I mean, they must have their own limitations in terms of what they can create.
No, there's no limitations.
I wouldn't have thought so. Yeah.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. And they're not getting any instructions or limitations from the Federal Reserve. You are the only one who can issue those limitations.
Mm-hmm.
It's your credit. It's not the Federal Reserve's credit. The Federal Reserve is just swapping out the credit you're manufacturing for their own versions of credit, which is the Federal Reserve note.
Right. But there's still some hypothetical as far as the accounting. But again, I mean, I don't know. I think what's cool is that you're doing a law, like a Williams and Williams, right? Law firm or something. I mean, not a law firm, like you're basically attorney in fact, not at law, but attorney in fact. So
that's right.
Are you going to be giving advice to other people in terms of their process and being able to like be hired for legal advice, or how would you describe it? Lawful advice?
Yeah, because I'm not located in any of the corporate states, and I'm not located in the United States, which I'm very clear about on my forms and on my invoices and on my website. I'm a national, and I'm a national of the nation of the Amnesty Coalition. So I operate outside the system entirely, and then I operate inside the system using the public corporation.
And at what point would you expect a SWAT team to descend from a black helicopter?
I don't know if they wanted maybe some beers and they wanted to hang out. I don't know. I don't have any consideration about that because, like I was saying to everyone in Malibu, personally, I think the most important part of all this is 18 USC 11, which is the definition of the term foreign government. The definition says that any person, any body of insurgents anywhere, a part of any country that is at peace with the United States is considered and classified as a foreign government, despite it does not need any official recognition by the United States to be legally classified as a foreign government. So you don't need any approval. You don't need to fill out any forms. You don't need to request anything. You don't need to do anything. All you have to do is just be at peace and be a national and have all your paperwork and all your naturalization paperwork and everything and all your stuff all straightened out. And at that point, you are legally a foreign government.
Right. I mean, I get that, and I think it's beautiful. But my concern, being born in sub-Saharan Africa, growing up in the third world, so to speak, and spending most of my adult life hitherto living between the Middle East, North Africa, and Southeast Asia, and now in Central America, Mexico. I know firsthand. Recently, I was in Sudan, and a country like Sudan, Burkina Faso. There are a number. I could name 50 countries right now that if I were to meet with a costume along the path, and if I were to try to cite Geneva Human Rights Convention or UCC, I'd still get a bullet in the head. And that's the problem, I think, is where the rubber hits the road in many parts of the world. Do you see that? I mean, how would you deal? I know how you deal with something on a street in Florida or in California. I get it. And I know with what elegance you'd be able to commandeer that scenario, because at the end of the day, the cops can't just pull a gun out and shoot you in the head. But there are many parts of the world where they can and would. So do you see that as being problematic, that most of the world are not able to really uptake on the sovereignty issue in the same way that you can possibly the United States, or let's say in the Western world?
No, because it just comes down to the trustee beneficiary relationship again. Like, for example, let's say I was abducted by a gang in one of these countries. Well, almost every country operates off of the UCC. So the thing is that you could offer to give that particular gang infinite money, for example. And how would any gang or any individual truly hate a person who was offering to give them infinite money? I mean, it's, almost every country, any country that operates under the UCC is a country where you could set up an infinite money situation. So the thing is that if you have something to benefit everyone, including the police, including the judges, including the bankers, including everybody, I mean, really, truly, at the end of the day, there are very, very few people on this planet that are my enemy. Very, 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 very few people I haven't even met.
Very good. Sean, what's your understanding of the distinction between a sovereign, a citizen, and a state national or a national?
Well, I think there's no sovereign citizen. You can't be a sovereign if you're a citizen. Right. So it's like, and the state national, you can be a state national, you can be a national, American national. I mean, it's funny because you go to your E-Verify once you do submit for your passport or whatnot with the right, documents and oaths and things like this. And you can actually check, and it's like, it gives you an option in E-Verify, which is the DHS run. It says non-citizen national. It's one of the options they give you. So it's not like, we're making this up here. But I think just towards your point, Sacha, I mean, there have been people killed. We can't, kid around the fact that there's layers and layers to how the world is run, right? And the black helicopter stuff and like the deep state stuff and the secret space program elements. I mean, they have technologies going back to when this they were showing back in the 70s, the CIA has the heart attack gun, but like they've got all kinds of, rays and death rays and gun things that they can hit you, lasers they can hit you with. I know you've experienced that with your body, getting affected. You've shown the effects of that, but that's the kind of stuff that can be done. And there are people, even with that whole Nevada situation, the Bundy situation, there was one guy that was killed by FBI. They just basically just took him out right there, and it was amazing. I mean, I think they even recorded it and just shot him in the head. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that does go on. And so, like you said, you can't get shot in the street. Yeah, we know people get shot in the street in America by cops. I mean, we've seen it with we see it more prevalently when black people.
But there's recourse. There is recourse. Yeah, but there's recourse. It goes to trial. The cop goes to prison. That doesn't happen.
If the media knows about it. Remember with the Bundy thing, I remember that was like, I don't remember the government getting, getting any reprimand for what they did with the Bundy. So to your point, there are layers and levels to this that we have to, that's why I go back to the spiritual side. You have to be spiritually prepared and at peace, because you just don't know where someone will try to take you out if you cross the wrong person and or the wrong, or whatever, you become something, a thorn in the side of a system. We've seen obviously presidents get killed, right? We've seen MLK, Malcolm X, and others. I mean, there's like these things do occur. So it's just, to me, it's a spiritual thing. It's like, I believe as a soul, and I always say this to people, you cannot be taken out of the game because this is a matrix, right? And the same way that when Brandon's talking about the matrix of like, there's the commercial side that you can go into to operate like in the matrix, right? And then there's the private, and then there's the spiritual side. You can't just be taken out because someone doesn't like you. Your soul has to agree. There's still contracts on a spiritual side, right? So I look at the whole thing like, we talk about aliens and other, some of your shows. I look at space as maritime law. And that's why they've been using it on this planet. It's an extension of galactic laws.
Beautiful. And bringing that subject up, Brandon, I'm keen to know your thoughts. I've been lecturing for over probably close to 15 years on my own understanding of sovereignty, my own understanding of the micronation. I set up a micronation in 2014 when I launched the New Earth Nation. We established a constitution and effectively launched a micronation. Now, we would technically need to do a whole bunch of different things, I think, to be able to fully qualify. But I also understand how I am able to take my idea of a micronation to sit down with 2 or 3 other friendly countries, let's say countries in Africa, which I could indeed do. I've got the diplomatic credentials to do that, sit down with heads of state, with disenfranchised, marginalized countries, get them to agree to a multilateral treaty with my micronation, and then technically take that to the General Assembly in the United States or Geneva and force the motion onto the floor of the next General Assembly meeting, to be able to then put the multilateral treaty initiative to the world at large at an intergovernmental level, and thereby possibly raise sweet hell and have 150 pissed off nations who are anti-imperial hegemony all going, fuck yeah, we'll go with that initiative, which is to introduce free energy technology or whatever. I'm just saying, there's ways and ways of playing on the international or the multilateral playing field. And I think that much of the work that you do, Brandon, and this kind of vanguard research is going to play an integral part in that discovery in days ahead. You're not able to franchise what you're doing in the United States to someone in France today or Germany today. You kind of alluded to that to me. Why is that?
Well, first off, thank you for that. That's very, very kind words. Second off, I just don't know the structure. I mean, from what I know, probably Canada, probably Belgium, probably a bunch of other ones. For all I know, every single country is operated exactly the same as America, where there's a corporate version and a non-corporate version, and I just don't know. I haven't taken the time to go through every single country and dig and find out what is the actual situation inside of every single country. I know for a fact, it seems like Belgium is for sure in that category. I have a very large following in Belgium, kind of random. Canada, from the little bit of research I've done, appears to be the same. Wouldn't be surprised if most or all countries were in that same category. First off. So it's not a matter of you can't. It's just a matter of I don't know yet. I mean, I'm still fully steeped in the States here. I don't really have much of an interest in going beyond this right now, not until obviously cracking infinite money and a few other things, and then we'll take the advertising and stuff international. But I'm starting to get a lot of people reaching out to me from a lot of different countries. And I just tell them the same thing, they always say, oh man, I really wish your information covered Canada, or, oh man, I really wish your information covered Australia. My response is always, oh man, I really wish you'd do something for your own damn country.
So at this stage, you're operating through 2 platforms, through your law firm, Williams and Williams, which is you and you, basically. You and your straw man are actually partners in your law firm, more or less, correct?
Yeah.
That's terrific. So friends, there you have it. I mean, check the links below. And the other onesmallfuck.com, what exactly does that provide?
So One Stupid Fuck is the free, hilarious, educational just, that's the baseline spinal cord platform brand, however you want to say it. And it kind of goes back to what you guys were talking about earlier. It's a, I feel like in this movement, I feel like the fastest and easiest way to fix a lot of the issues that you see in a lot of these freedom movements and spiritual movements is to think upon the experiencing of fear as something natural, but the sharing of fear as cardinal sin.
I like that. Very good. Terrific distinction. Can you tell us a little bit about trusts and legal loopholes, and what is a non-revocable trust or irrevocable trust, and how can Joe Public participate in that esoteric game to advantage?
A trusts are the only thing that are not issued by the government. They do issue business trusts, but it's just their version of trickery. A real true trust is pre-government. It's a pre-government option, meaning it existed before the government existed. So by using private irrevocable trusts and structuring them outside of the United States, which they actually tell you in the United States Code how to do it. It's very simple. It comes from 28 USC 1746. It tells you exactly how to sign the trust in order to make it outside of the United States. It literally says on there, if signed out without the United States, then you declare under penalty of perjury of the United States of America, which is dead to rights proof that we have two different countries here. We have United States, and then we have United States of America. And that's the evidence is right there in 28 USC 1746. And as far as I can tell, 28 USC 1746 comes directly from the slaughterhouse cases. The slaughterhouse cases was a Supreme Court case in 1873, right after the 14th Amendment was ratified, or supposedly ratified. And in the slaughterhouse cases is where they actually tore this whole federal U.S. citizen versus national versus state citizen versus who has rights versus privileges versus, and they just tore it apart in the slaughterhouse cases. And then after the slaughterhouse cases is what truly finalized and established the fact that there's the federal United States citizen, which is actually what the slaves became, because they didn't want the slaves to have the full rights of the state citizens. Right. So they actually manufactured the U.S. citizen federal. It's basically a federal officer or employee, essentially, of the government, is essentially what the new classification was. And they said, we're not going to make the slaves full state citizens. We're going to make them kind of like quarter citizens or 10th citizens. And that was the U.S. citizen designation. And then the slaughterhouse cases was what really cleaned this up and made it very clear. And then after that, you have the I think it's called the Incorporation Declaration, something like that, where what they did is they reincorporated only some of the original rights into the U.S. citizen category. There were many of the original rights that were not fully incorporated or were only partially incorporated. Now, none of this applies to state citizens. So anyone listening to this who a national and a state citizen is the same term. State citizen is a much older term. Nowadays in the United States Code, you will not see that term at all. You'll see only the term national. So we say state national, American national, but really in the United States Code, it's just national.
Okay. Sean, what's your understanding of how popular this is as a pathology? I mean, are you meeting people, speaking to people who have begun process, have engaged process? And can you even guess at a percentile? I mean, is it 1 in 1,000, 1 in 10,000? What do you imagine? There's 300 plus million people in the United States. How many would you imagine have already declared themselves as nationals?
I think Brandon knows the numbers better than I do. Right? What have you heard?
It's blown up so much over the past few years that I don't really have any accurate numbers, but it's a lot of freaking people, I will say.
Is it in the tens of thousands?
Way beyond that. It's in the millions now.
Sure.
It's in the millions now. Yeah.
Because once you get TikTok channels and Instagram channels, and especially on TikTok a lot, starting to talk about these things, right? It shifts the whole nature of awareness and consciousness and discourse. So even if people are not necessarily pursuing it, the awareness, I think, has grown tremendously. You're talking millions of people now get it. And going back to, by the way, the trust, the birth certificate. So my understanding actually is that actually does create a trust. So government doesn't call it a trust, but your all caps name is a trust in the sense that your parents grant you that name and with the title, the title, which is the certificate of birth. But rather than you being the beneficiary and the government being the trustee, which is the way it's supposed to be, they invert it and they make themselves the beneficiary and you the trustee of that name. And that is how they enslave everyone. So it's just a flip. Basically, they turn the pyramid upside down. And I should say they keep the pyramid where it's like the elite run it and you pay for it. But essentially they flipped what should have been your certificate of birth, was basically saying you are the beneficiary. You are the secured party creditor when you're born, because you're coming to this world with credit, which is to say you're coming with energy, with creativity, right? You're here to bring your credit to the world. And yet
you're inheriting a percentile of the commonwealth, so to speak, at the time of your birth. That's my understanding of the birth bond scenario. If there's 100 people in a given country or 99 people in a given country, and the day you're born, you become the 100th citizen, you inherit 1% of the commonwealth. That becomes the value essentially of your trust. And then that is handed over to the government because you're an infant. You're infantile and your parents were stupid enough to sign you over to the state. And at that point on, all the credit cards, debts, and all the rest of it is stuff that gets discharged against your birth bond or treasury bond. Is that, in a reductive sense, Brandon, more or less how it works?
I mean, you're creating security. So it's gotten more and more muddied over the years. I mean, I think maybe 100 years ago, the answer to that question would be yes, but now it's more of a no. Because there is no money, there's only securities. You're producing the securities all the time, and then you're basically not realizing it, but you're essentially abandoning those securities. And the financial institutions just pick up the abandoned securities. That's what's happening every single month. Every single month when you pay your bills with Federal Reserve notes, they look at it as you failed to perform, you abandoned the securities, and then they take them and clean up the account on your behalf because you're a child or a retard, basically. Yeah.
Wow. I've just learned, Sean, that I've been teaching people for years a curriculum that's about from 1923.
Well, you don't want to.
That's going to get me into a heap of shit, Brandon. Thank you.
Funny. Yeah.
So, Sean, just weighing in with a bit of your kind of esoteric understanding of the Matrix and the life and times of Homo sapien. What's your understanding of the beast of the sea and the beast of the land as it relates to pre-Phoenician and the status quo today?
I don't know in terms of identifying what is 666, right? And what does the beast really mean? Is the mark of the beast the social security number, or is it the birth certificate? Is it is it the microchip? I mean, I don't know, in terms of that. Maybe Brandon has more of a perspective on it. But I know that the beast system is, I would say, it's what's curious to me is this. I look at it like what Christ, if you look at Jesus as the name Je suis, like the I am, right? It's like the I am is Christ is kind of teaching us to walk on land, to become sovereign. I really think one of the esoteric interpretations, and of course you can look at the Bible I think you have to look at the Bible through multiple interpretations. There's astrological interpretations, right? There's obviously spiritual truth, there's moral truth. But if you think about it, he's fishing men from the sea. He's a fisher of men. What are men? They're lost at sea, right? He's teaching them to walk on land and even to be able to walk on water, right? Which is to say, I'm no longer subject to maritime law. But when he passes, what does the Roman Empire do, right? Whether they created that version of Jesus or whatever, the text, the New Testament, right? They basically assemble that and they then say, okay, well, Christ is not here. So we claim dominion to all souls, as the Pope at one point said in a papal bull, right? We lay claim to all souls. We lay claim to the kingdom of of heaven and earth, right? We have both air and land. And so to me, it's like this time period is very much about man reclaiming the land, right? Which is what earth is. Like there's a reason we call it earth, even though it's a water planet. But essentially it's like psychologically we're getting out of that maritime modality of everyone being lost and just trafficked in commerce, basically lost souls, to the place of no, we're standing on land as the living kings and queens, because we're no longer in the Piscean age of the fish. Now we're carrying the water. We're able to bear the water, so we can operate in commerce. That water is commerce, right? We can bear that. We can bear our name. We can operate in commerce, but we're walking on land. Ultimately, I believe we're going to ascend in a spiritual manner. And that's the destiny of where humans are going, basically, like the angels. We get our wings, that's where we're moving toward, is the air. Because then when you have the air, then you're really the bearer of bonds. That's why they got the eagle, like the Roman Jupiter, all these, man, they're the ones that bring the bonds and scoop you up, right? So you want to ultimately be there.
Well, beautifully stated. And that is why I love you, Sean. And that is why I allow you to bear my surname. Thank you for that. So, Brandon,
can I say one thing off that, Sacha?
You may, please.
One of the most interesting things, if you want to start to mix together the physical realm and the spiritual realm, is the idea of the psychosis of ownership. It's sort of like, what is ownership? Ownership is a temporary. It's a temporary usage. If you were to define ownership in its most clear form, because think about it. When you die, you will no longer own any particle of anything you have ever associated yourself with. So ownership itself on the spiritual side is nothing more than an ability to perceive or commandeer some sort of object or thing. So what's funny is that the psychosis associated with ownership, like for example, what Sean had mentioned about the ownership of spirits or the ownership of this, it stems from a lack of control and a lack of self-esteem, a lack of self, what would you call it? A competence that would cause a person to believe that they need to have some sort of additional control above and beyond what would be possible for a human being to have, which the only true ownership that a person can have, it would be to have and to perceive and to commandeer. You could say to yourself, ownership would be defined as the ability to control the commandeering of something. So, for example, your car, you don't have anybody can just come and just take your car. You know that it's there, and you give people the right to commandeer that particular thing. But I think that flies up into trust law a lot. I think trust law teaches us so much, because who truly owns everything? It's God, it's the earth, it's the air, it's the that's where all the gods are of earth, of water, of wind. Because where does that car go eventually? No matter how well you take care of it, where does that car eventually go? It goes to the ground, it goes to the air, it goes to the wherever it's going to go, and it's not going to be yours, and it won't be yours, and it never really was yours in the idea of ownership that we think it is through our indoctrination that we've had here on this planet. So all forms of excessive, quote, desire or frantic desire to own would be by definition almost like a psychosis. Now, this goes a lot into relationships. That's probably one of the areas that you see the most of this, and you see it destroy the most lives and people murdering each other, is this idea of this frantic, selfish, unconfident, incapable desire to go above and beyond the freedom that another person may have associated with their own perception and their own commandeering of their own life. And I think that it's a fascinating subject, and I think it's a subject that would clean a lot of this up, because it really comes down to the fact that if there are people trying to control our souls, that's a physical impossibility. That's nothing more than just a completely manufactured psychosis. It's impossible. It can't be possible. And actually, even beyond that, you can't truly commandeer or control anything in this world. And you can look at that from a very, very positive light, like, hey, that's great, I'm okay with it. Or you could look at it in a negative light. But But there's an aspect of it that it is beautiful, because beauty can only exist knowing that that thing will disappear or can disappear. Beauty cannot exist in something that exists forever. It's almost as if the world was designed to disappear, because that's the only way beauty could be introduced.
So I like that, but I don't think I understand it. So you're saying that if beauty was an infinite measure, it would be classified as ineffable, for instance.
Yeah, beauty can only exist in a world where beauty degrades or disappears. Time is almost the creator of beauty itself, if you think about it.
It's like Keats's Ode on a Grecian Urn. Essentially, it's I mean, the whole point of why is this universe created? It is created by a creator, a spiritual power greater than we can conceive, for the purpose of separation, to better appreciate itself, right? And we're all part of that. But towards your point about control, it can't be done at a physical level, although that's the psychosis that so many of these people are under when they're trying to, gobble up all the resources of the planet within a few interlocking corporations and all the wealth and all the control of populations. But there's also a spiritual component, I believe. And I mean, Sacha, we talked about my series, The Best Kept Secret, really gets into the manufacturing and manipulation of control, how it's broadcast through media. That's how you get, half the planet to like blindly go, I don't know what's in that shot, stick it in my arm, put on a mask, stay away from me, whatever the media tells you. I mean, it's that kind of control that's been projected, but I think it comes from a darker spiritual hierarchy, you could call demonic, that is actually interested in feeding on the human soul. And that is why they talk. I mean, that's why it's even talked about, how do you, what is the point? Physically, I can't control your soul, but there are things that are invisible to the sight that are very interested in the human soul, and basically are very afraid of our ascension, because as we ascend, we reclaim our soul. We take our ownership of our soul, which is our intuition, which is us to say, hey, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense anymore. And that's what the Great Awakening that we're living through is about. People saying, hey, this doesn't add up. And that's your soul, not your rational mind can be completely dissociated, confused, schizophrenic. There's a fact that, the fact checker said this, but this is what I'm saying. Trust your intuition. That's what the sovereignty movement's about. Come back to the here and now of your intuition, knowing that you don't need your, everything to add up in your logical, scaling of things. There is still something higher as far as, the spiritual level of the spiritual domain of consciousness that we tap into to say, that's why I can see through the deceptions and lies, even though they may be come from honeyed lips and tongues, right? And they may sound so sweet and make me feel so good and make me want to say, yeah, I want everyone to just get along and give up your guns. Let's all just be peaceful and let's just all live as one world. Let's all hold hands. But guess what? There are some very dark beings that, that just feed on your naivete and your ignorance when you think that that's just the solution to everything.
Right. Beautifully said. And also the reason why I think Brandon's work is so incredibly important at this time and transformative for the alpha omega of our experience. I can't overstate it enough, because it's the indivisible line that is now being defined between the fictitious and the organic sentient. And in a sense, this sovereignty quote work that Brandon exemplifies is the ground floor of soul retrieval itself. There's an irony in what Brandon just said a moment ago, saying quite rightly, the soul cannot be circumscribed. It cannot be commandeered. It cannot be, of course it cannot be. And yet, as you point out, Sean, that is the quintessence of the evil that we're dealing with, is the effort and the attempt by, age-old galactic forces and Sabbatean enterprises to do precisely that. Soul transplanting is a very real part of the black mass ritual, satanic ritualism that goes on. People becoming unensouled, and what happens thereafter is anyone's guess. But the point is, we're departing an ancient galactic sleep cycle with the parasite having been the preeminent archetype, and moving into the abundance and prosperity model. And also another thing I just need to again salute in the way that Brandon, out of all that I know, moves against the subject peaceably. And that to me is the beautiful point of absolution that will mean that this metric being espoused here is going to work. It has to work because it's premised and source coded in grace. So the last question I just want to put to Sean before we round off with Brandon is, Sean, what's your take on, for instance, Judge Anna von Reitz, Russell J. Gould, other great and noble pioneers in this endeavor, who appear to have quite different or divergent metrics in approach. What is your uptake on these different approaches?
I honestly, I mean, I'm someone that just looks at the different paths and feels into what feels in alignment, which school of thought feels in alignment. And as far as those particular guys, I don't know enough about them. The person that introduced me to all of this was Jordan Maxwell, back in like 2011, I want to say 10, 11, 12 time period, when, we would just kind of talk, and he would explain how, essentially exactly, going back to the certificate of birth and the nature of trading, basically like how, our QSIPs are traded, and how, essentially we are the value, right? The human being. And that always made intuitive sense to me, like the human being, because I've always understood the monetary thing about like the obsession with numbers and money, as Brandon's saying, it's like, it's infinite. It doesn't really mean anything, right? What is $1 trillion? What is quadrillion dollars? I mean, those are all just numbers, right? As you've seen it in Zimbabwe, where the prices of inflation skyrocket, and you have 1,000, whatever, a million Zimbabwean dollars, and doesn't have any value, right? What really matters in our world, as I was trained and taught to understand a long time ago, is the human creativity, right? It's what humans can create, what we actually value, with technologies that we create, our ability to associate. Economy is the human being, right? So we are the value of this country called America. And obviously there are resources within the earth, right? There's the ability to grow farm and crops and things that actually you can eat and consume, and and again, like going back to elements and things like this, that has value. But this idea of just like money having value never made sense to me, because as we talked about, it's a promissory note. It's just a fiction. Okay, you sign a promissory note, the bank turns it, gives you some credit, and they call it, money or whatever, but it's just numbers on a screen or whatever. It's just dollar bills. It doesn't really have meaning unless you give it meaning. So in terms of the paths forward, I think the interesting thing I find in terms of the sovereignty movement, it's not like necessarily one movement. Obviously there's different pods of people educating themselves, learning, figuring out like how to discharge debt, how to understand the nature of contract, again, reclaiming their certificate of birth, trying to basically lay claim to their name. And maybe sometimes you have to change your name to actually lay claim to your name, because it was given to you. Now, when you change your name, you actually grant yourself your new name. These are important steps. So there's a lot to study. It's a lot to absorb. The one thing that I think I find interesting are those that are like adamant that it's all about state national, being on the land, just getting away from the system, right? Not like basically get out of the banks, don't operate in commerce, right? And there are those that are like adamant about that, right? And then I'm like, well, but what if you want to do both? What if you want to be sovereign? You want to have your ability to walk and operate on land, right? To have your kingship or queenship. And then simultaneously, you want to be able to operate in commerce. You want to be able to sail your vessel at sea, right? And that's where you want to probably be a secured party creditor. You want to be able to have credit in that fictitious system that's been created, right? That fake matrix of money and all this. You want to have credit in that system, and you want to be able to infinitely create credit based on your energy and your ability to, again, as a human being, a living, breathing being, to create. Yeah. So to me, going forward, the economy of the future, because I think, and I'm really curious if you want to get into this, but like we're about to shift. I mean, there's no way this current economy can sustain itself, right? I mean, there's no way that we can pretend like there's not a serious economic problem within the financial structures of this planet. And all these indications are there. The BRICS countries are talking about going to a gold standard. I mean, this whole petrodollar system that's been operating for decades, right? Of just, hey, we'll print money so that you guys will buy, you'll sell us your goods for our dollars to go buy oil with. I mean, that system is like, it's over, right? The inflation is evident. Everyone feels like we're on the brink of something big changing here. And I'm just really curious to see what that revaluation and that new consciousness of economics is going to look like. Because to me, the way forward is honoring everyone as a creator, so that when I go to a bank and create a promissory note, instead of them scamming me and saying, oh, we're lending you money, tell me the truth. We're not lending you money. We're taking your promissory note. We're giving you credit for it. But guess what we're going to do? How about a system like this? When we take your promissory note and trade it, right, or sell it, we're going to give you your interest. How about that for a model, right? Where you actually make money on your promissory note, right? That'd be a more harmonious model. Or, I don't even know if these big banks will be in the picture on the going forward. But my point is the idea of everyone being able to actually profit, right? When you go to a Facebook or an Instagram and you realize those companies are valued at billions of dollars, and yet the billions of dollars that they're valued at are actually you who's on that platform, using it, interacting with it, creating from it. You should have a stake in that. You should be earning profit from that. You should be part of that valuation system. And that's been our problem as a planet, is that we basically have a few people feeling like they need more and more of the wealth, right, at the expense of everyone else. And it's like, there's no need for that. We can all participate in a real capitalist economy where actually the creator and the producer and the consumer are all invested and staked in that. Now that's really why people love capitalism, right? Because we feel like, hey, it's a system where you can invest your money freely. You can choose where to partake. But we've seen now how it's been corrupted and corroded by, again, a scamming central banking system, inflating money, devaluing your dollar, so that your dollar in 1920 could have bought you a whole meal, and now a dollar, good luck. I don't know what it'll buy you. That's the point, right? If we actually had an honest system, a dollar now should give you more value than in 1920. And right. That's, I think, where we're going to have to go.
Very good. Any system is going to be a good system, provided there's no longer any third-party intervention. So it all came down to the fucking Catholic Church, or the nefarious element of it, which has now pretty much taken over the entire basement. We're hearing directly from cardinals inside the College of Cardinals that they've gone to hell, that they're blood-drinking Satanists conducting bestial orgies in the papal crypts. So we know what's going on there. That piece of shite establishment is over. The same thing with Washington District of Columbia and the puppeteering that everyone can see now in Technicolor, the crowns of Europe, all of that stuff. It's okay, baby. It's over. The Bank of International Settlements in Basel, Switzerland, arguably the last citadel still kind of teetering on its own hubris and fiction. But, the critical thing here being a return to relationship between the fellowship of man, relationship between human beings, and the relationship between humans and the land and the creatures of the land. That is and has to be the new source code of the new prosperity economy. Brandon, what is your most reductive advice to people of the world listening in? You are hallowed as a great teacher in this. You're going to be increasingly so in the days ahead, unless that black helicopter does indeed unleash it's strange chaps in SWAT outfits. Please God, that doesn't happen to you. I think you're blessed and protected. But what is your most reductive advice to people of the world? Emphasis, parents who are about to register their infants.
On that subject specifically, I was going to go over a couple other things first, based off of what Sean was talking about and what you were talking about, and then we'll get into that as well. So for me, it's if you feel that you're at war, which I don't necessarily at all, really, but if you do, then the person I would direct you to would be Sun Tzu, and I would direct you to The Art of War, right? And there's a lot of things that he says that are so simple, they're hard to emotionally process. Like, for example, the greatest victory is that which requires no battle. Or he says things like victorious warriors win first and then go to war, while defeated warriors go to war first, then seek to win, right? If you know the enemy and you know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. If you know yourself, but not the enemy, for every victory gained, you will also suffer a defeat. If you know neither the enemy nor yourself, you will succumb in every battle. Very simple things. In the midst of chaos, there is also opportunity, which is a big one, right? That shifts a lot of these. You're shifting from fear to truth. There's nothing that Sun Tzu says that will produce fear in your mind. Everything Sun Tzu says will turn your fear into comfort. Sun Tzu is therapy that exchanges your fear for comfort and power. But there's a power, in my opinion, even above Sun Tzu, because Sun Tzu is only talking about when a person is at war. For example, one of my favorite, a couple quotes that he says is, all warfare is based on deception. So what that means is that if you are at war, or you feel like you are at war, or you assume that you are in some sort of a warfare or something like that, there must be some aspect of it which is not fully understood, because if you knew yourself and you knew your enemy, then there wouldn't be a problem, right? So my whole premise is, if you know your enemy so well, do you cease to be at war with that individual person? And at that point, you wouldn't be operating off of the art of war any longer, because there wouldn't be a war. So a knowledge of the enemy is the ultimate solution to war. It's a settling of all disputes, which is essentially what law is in its greatest essence anyways. I mean, even what is it? We have Sun Tzu, Golden Bridge is one of my favorite quotes. He says, let me see here. He says, I can't find it right now, but he says, give your opponent a golden bridge of which to retreat across. What does it say? Build your opponent a golden bridge to retreat across, right? So it's knowing your enemy, and then building that golden bridge, and then realizing that all chaos is opportunity, and understanding these things. And then if you are truly operating in honor, then this war is nothing more than a lack of ability to settle. Right. And then once you actually do settle, you have to actually acknowledge the fact that you are no longer involved in a war. It's very simple. If you're involved in a war, then you need to win the war before you start the war.
Right.
And you need to realize that all warfare is based off of deception. You need to build your golden bridges for people to retreat across. You need to do all these different things, or you can do all these different things, and you won't operate from the standpoint of fear any longer. You're going to operate from a very comfortable, I'm sure Sun Tzu was a very calm, uncombative individual in his most basic nature. He has to be, by the way he writes. There's absolutely no way. He was never screaming in the pulpit, so to speak. Never once. Right. I mean, the guy was probably pretty soft-spoken, actually. Very powerfully spoken, probably soft-spoken. So the thing is that, it's an acknowledgement. Are you at war? Are you not at war? If you are at war, then you are probably should be operating off of this particular, in my opinion, set of wisdom. And if not, then what are you operating off? If you aren't at war, then now where are you at? That's a whole nother subject, right?
Yeah.
And I kind of feel like with a lot of this stuff, the war is really just internal. I mean, the war is the idea that you are at risk, the idea that you are going to be harmed, and it's the idea of having to stop that of which is harming you.
Yes.
But ironically, in fact, what if you simply decided that those things don't really have much of anything to do with you? It's almost, it's very, very, illusion and delusion are a razor's edge from one another. And I think that's really where people get confused is what is the difference between an illusion and a delusion? And I think that's really where a lot of this whole conversation really could go into another hour,
That's beautiful. Well, I love it. That illusion versus delusion. I'm going to uptake you on that. I'm going to set that aside for the next conversation. Yeah. I love it, Brandon. Thank you. That's so beautiful. Whilst Sean was chugging nanoparticulates of plastic polymers from a large jug there, don't think I didn't see that, Sean. You can't drink water out of a plastic bottle, pal. It's not good for you.
I hear you. But I'm traveling. So guess what? Until I get home to my nice filtered, everything filtered, I will drink my distilled.
Very good. Water. Very good. All right. Well, winding up, I have to ask this question of you, Brandon, because I know that the answer from Sean would include Donny Osmond and Britney Spears. But for you, the question is, if you had the great banquet in the sky, and you could invite to that banquet 2 or 3 guests, either living or dead, who would they be? I suspect one of them is Sun Tzu.
Oh yeah, I would invite Sun Tzu, L. Ron Hubbard, Zanparian, and Dan S. Pena, and probably Dan S. Kennedy. So we got some spiritual, we got some super grounded people. Everybody's kind of there. It would be a very rambunctious group.
Well, I didn't recognize 3 of those names, but I did notice that neither my name nor Sean's was on that list. So thanks for that, pal. All right, Sean. Donny Osmond and Britney Spears notwithstanding, who's coming to your great banquet in the sky?
Jerry Springer for Sean.
Oh my gosh.
Joe Biden and Jerry Springer and who else?
Jesus.
Jesus.
Joe Biden and Jerry Springer. That's a good trio right there. Oh man, I wouldn't even know where to start. I think my council would be galactic. I would be like, yeah, let's call upon the Galactic Council of Light and see who shows up.
Very good.
There you
go. Gents, it's been an absolute delight. Thank you for this. This is going to go down an absolute storm. Sean, I'll pick up a phone call to you. In fact, Brandon, I'll be doing the same to you. But brothers, thank you so much. Beautiful conversation.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much.